The president just the other day said democracy is in peril. Do you believe it is?
Yeah, I do. I think we have gotten lazy in assuming that democracy will always survive. I think democracy around the globe is in a recession because when you have this advent of so much information and you don't know who to believe, and that happens with, this explosion of the internet, and you can just find whatever news source and misinformation, it becomes really easy for people to just say, I'm going to find the one person I trust, and then everything they say, I'll believe it. And, well, that's the definition of authoritarianism. And I think, when you talk about things like even flirting with the idea of a coup d'etat in the United States of America, I think Michael Flynn stood up there and he wants to get applause. So he's going to tell people what they want to hear. I'm sure he actually, in some cases, maybe really believes there should be a coup d'etat. But what you're doing to people, for every leader that's elected in the Republican Party, by your silence, much less if you come out in support of that, but especially by your silence too, you're allowing people to think that this is okay. And I think anybody that's never been in combat, and I'm not going to pretend to be here, being a guy on the ground in the war. I flew in the sky. But if you get medicine from your local pharmacy, if you like to put gas in your car, any of those luxuries that you have today, you like to get on the internet, all that will be gone if this government collapses. But you have people with this fetish for like an overthrow violence thing, and it's being fed by leaders that just don't want to tell them the truth because it may be harder to tell them the truth than it is to just go along with this.
I mean, obviously, there's now this reporting from Maggie Haberman from The Times that the former president is telling people he expects to be reinstated as president this August. And, certainly a lot of people maybe listening to that will laugh at that and say, oh, that's just ridiculous. But there's a lot of his supporters who believe that and would like to make it happen.
Yeah, 100%. And, look, if you there's a lack of trust in this country. We know that. Lack of trust in institutions. By the way, the last institution that doesn't really have a lack of trust is the military. And people are trying very hard to change that. That's a dangerous thing when people start seeing the military as partisan. But yeah, I mean, if you look at just all this stuff that's going on and all that misinformation that's being thrown out there, it is a really dangerous moment in this country. And people have to stand up and they have to tell people the truth. If we have a party that's sitting around saying, well, it's Antifa that actually on January 6th attacked the Capitol, but we don't want to do a January 6th commission because, it's time to move on. Or there were no, as Senator Johnson has said, there were no guns or weapons confiscated on January 6th. Well, a couple of quick points on that. First off, there were no arrests because the police were too busy defending the Capitol and defending lives to put somebody under arrest, read them their rights, and confiscate their weapons. But we know that at least in 300 of the cases that the FBI has cited, there were at least 36 weapons, including things like bear spray, which, by the way, is no joke and can kill people. We know there were pipe bombs found. And we also know through court filings that folks in the Oath Keepers were having discussions about stashing guns outside in Virginia so they couldn't be confiscated, so they could go out and bring them in when Trump incited the Insurrection Act. This is the kind of danger, and we have so many members of Congress and elected officials that just go along with it, put their heads down, think it's going to go away. But if somebody like Donald Trump says something, or leaders say something, or they don't say something against something totally false, there's no reason to believe that anybody's going to organically come to the truth. And it's just a few of us out here saying this.
Yeah, I mean, you are one of the few very brave, congresspeople who is telling the truth on all of this and calling it as you see it. What do your fellow members of Congress, I mean, I don't really know how Congress works in terms of how much you talk, casually with each other, or if those days are kind of gone. But do people believe what they're arguing, or is it they're just keeping their heads down, they're going along to get along, to maintain their seat, hoping that and thinking, well, you know what, it's not going to be that bad, it'll blow away, this fever will break? So, some people just stoke it because they can raise money on it. Marjorie Taylor Greene, some of those, right? I don't know if they actually believe it. I think the vast majority of Republican members of Congress don't believe this garbage, this conspiracy stuff. There's probably a few that do. I think others just determine, look, and I understand this thought a little bit, which is like,
Look, my expertise, for instance, is, in somebody's mind, it's healthcare. And I need to survive so I can be here to affect healthcare policy. And look, if you turn against the Republicans, you get kicked out of the tribe. There's a lot of people trying to kick me out of the Republican tribe, and I was here way before Donald Trump ever was. But then when you go and vote conservative, by the way, Anderson, I'm pretty conservative, I'm center right. Then you have people that say, oh, we thought you were different. Well, this isn't about policy, it's about the defense of democracy. The number of people that I've seen say things like, well, we respect Liz Cheney, but my goodness, she's a conservative. We're done with her. Of course she is. The number one thing, though, that Republicans and Democrats have to face right now as a country, and independents, is the defense of democracy, because none of the issues you're outraged about today, whether it's Dr. Seuss or whatever stokes the outrage for your fundraising, whatever you're outraged about today won't matter when you can't get your heart medicine, when the country has failed, and you're going to look back and say, my goodness, I got really outraged about nothing.
Well, also, for those who are, worried about who's making these arguments and where their politics are. We as a country, as a functioning democracy, we need two functioning political parties at the very least. And arguing, full-throated arguments, difference of opinions, have at it, all of that is what our democracy depends on. But it's got to be based on facts. It's got to be based on, on support of democracy itself.
That's right. Well, think about this. So it's the old saying. I actually heard this recently for the first time, but I guess it's an old saying. They say conservatives need liberals to pull them forward. Liberals need conservatives to hold them back sometimes. And that dance has worked well in this country. There's some things we could have done better, of course. But what we do in politics, so the whole House of Representatives that I'm familiar with, was created so that you take all these passions, you distill it into a political argument, a heated political argument, lets out the steams, you take votes, and people have, their input. But the party has convinced 74 million Americans, many who believe it, that the election was stolen, that their vote didn't count, that they were disenfranchised. And in that process, it's impossible to not expect what happened on January 6th to happen, because we believe in a republic that we have a right to be heard and to vote. And we are playing with fire. And that has to stop. And by the way, for my Republican friends out there that say, what about the Democrats? Well, yes, I could be on your show and I could tell 100 things I disagree with on Democrats. But as the Bible says, if you have a plank in your own eye, why don't you take care of that before you start pointing out the speck in somebody else's?
Congressman Kinzinger, if you could just stand by for one moment. I want to bring in CNN's Dana Bashka. I understand she has some new reporting on what you've been calling dangerous behavior. Dana, what's going on?
That's right. It's just more reporting on the former president's mindset and the fact that, we knew from his public statements how much he is focused, obsessed, unhealthily obsessed with the 2020 election, and that only continues in a very dire way. And I'm using the word dire because those are the terms that they are being described in by some of his former aides. One former aide told me that at this point, because the former president is so singularly focused on this notion, this conspiracy that the election was stolen from him, that he is listening to, quote, the bottom of the crazies in the barrel. That is where he is right now. It's not that he doesn't talk to a lot of different people, some people who are trying to tell him, cut it out, focus on going forward, don't focus on the past. That is, I am told, not where he is right now. And it's interesting because we have to look ahead to this weekend, Anderson. The former president, is going to have a speech for the first time in a long time at a political convention, GOP convention in North Carolina. There's a lot of agitation, concern about how far he is going to go into these conspiracies. Because, yes, he has these statements that he puts out, but he doesn't have social media anymore.
Congressman, did you anticipate the former president's power remaining, I'm talking about among, your GOP colleagues, remaining as strong as it has been?
No, I didn't. Look, after January 6th, I predicted that by the summer, he's persona non grata. Obviously, I'm wrong. It's pretty close to summer. But I think what happened is, a few weeks after the insurrection, frankly, Kevin McCarthy went down to Mar-a-Lago. He took the political paddles, and he resurrected Donald Trump's politics back to life. He could have done, at the bare minimum, the Mitch McConnell, who's this guy you're speaking of, I've never heard of him thing, and we would be moving on as a party. We'd be in that process. Instead, he's been resurrected. And look, it's amazing. I guess yesterday he put out a little press release that nobody covers because it's like, you know, if you put out a press release from Mar-a-Lago and nobody's listening, did it happen? But he called people like Barbara Comstock a loser, and he called me a loser. I've never lost an election. He has. He's the only loser in that mix, and we're trying to grab onto him as if he's somehow the ticket to the future. And he is instead obsessed with the fact that he lost again at something. And instead of, in his post-presidency, taking on, I don't know, some issue that he cares about or something that we see former presidents do, he's down there obsessing about the fact that he's a loser. I'm sorry you're a loser, but you lost.
You know, one of the things that you've said in the past, which I've really respected, is that, you know, there are some things more important than holding on to a job. And, you know, as much as you want to serve, if you were asked to do something that you didn't believe in, you would not continue down that road. It seems like that is such an antiquated notion now. You know, and I go back to General Flynn, who, you know, I talked to one of his former commanding officers yesterday, Spider Marks, who has no idea who this person is that is on that stage in front of a QAnon audience or a lot of QAnon folks, you know, supporting a coup. That, I mean, what he did, he had a sterling reputation while he was in the military. And I've heard that from a number of generals who I've talked to. I don't know. I cannot wrap my mind around how a person goes from that in a very short amount of time. I don't know if they need money. I don't know if they just like the applause and they want some sort of power down the road, but it's incomprehensible to me.
Well, it is to me too. And, you know, fame, I guess, applause is really intoxicating. I mean, I've been in Congress now 11 years, and there's moments, particularly in the past, not so much recently, but, you know, you get attention for something and it feels good. People know who I am. And that's just a real moment I'm going to share with you. And everybody that's on TV probably has to fight that at some point. And then some people, though, will take that and in a desperate attempt to get that continual hollow reinforcement, will put their oath on the line and lie to people so that they get that. They are abusing the raw and noble patriotism, as my friend Michael Wood in Texas would say, the raw and noble patriotism of Americans. You're abusing that for your own personal sake. And listen, Anderson, we as politicians rightly, you know, get tearful on Memorial Day. We talk about how great it is that we have people that are willing to put their lives on the line for this country. Andreas O'Keefe is a buddy of mine, died a few years ago. I wear his name on my wrist all the time. If people are willing at a young age to put their life on the line for this country and we can't put our career on the line for the same thing, what's it worth? Why are you doing it, right? But if everybody just comes out and tells the truth, has differences of opinion or perspective, of course, we can fix this country. Short of that, we got some trouble.
What do you think it takes to break this fever? I mean, there aren't many people standing up like you, and it's going to take more. Well, look, countryfirst.com, country1st.com. I want to focus on telling the truth, restoring conversation, the ability. I would encourage anybody watching, if you're on the left side of the political spectrum, make a friend with somebody on the right. If you're on the right, make a friend with somebody on the left. Learn their fears, right? You'll realize you have the same fears they do. Everybody is fearful of something, and that's what leads to our politics. That's a start. It is not going to come from Washington, though, Anderson. It's not going to come from a wake-up of the political class, because truthfully, it's kind of how it was written in the Constitution. The political class, especially in the House, reflects the passions of the people at that moment. We need people to demand better of their leaders. And I think we need to implement things like ranked choice voting to get out of this system where really 10% of a congressional district elects their congressional representative. It's going to take a lot of work. We can sit back and demonize the other side only, or we can actually work to solve problems. I want to solve problems, and if it costs me my election, so be it. The thing that worries me, and you see this more because you're out with your constituents all the time, is I feel like it used to be people have different political beliefs and arguments and stuff, but they lived next door to each other and would there were commonalities. They both had kids, or they both had, interests or hobbies, whatever it was, that brought them together. And, the politics was something on the periphery maybe, but it wasn't who they were. It seems like now that has become less and less. And that notion of, I don't know if more people are just identifying themselves as their politics, but that just seems to be not a great way to have a society, that we're all walking around as a representative of our politics. It just seems that's not what citizenry really is about.
Well, and it's almost the curse of being the blessed country we are, right? I know there's a lot of challenges. I'm not papering over that, but you can pull out your phone. You have access to any information you want. We know we're not going to get attacked by another country. We're the leaders of the world for now. And so you have to be outraged about something. So there's people out there more than happy to reflect your fears at you about the other person, raise money on it, and they raise a ton of money on fears. If I put out an optimistic email, I'm going to raise about 1/10 of what somebody that says, give me money or Nancy Pelosi is going to destroy your family. That's the kind of stuff that has to stop. And everybody has to take ownership for themselves. I can try to just tell the truth. I can't do it alone. I need people with me.
But the other thing I don't understand, I hate to keep going back on Flynn, but it's sort of representative of a lot of what we see, which is, I understand people who have not ever served or been in a combat zone and just seen, even as a reporter, seen what happens when there is a coup, or seen what happens when there's a strongman and there's a fight over that strongman, or there's an autocrat. But when you've seen it up close, and particularly for service members, when you've seen it up close, that is the last thing you would want in this country, because it does not. Nobody gets out of this alive. Nobody gets out of it intact.
No, a civil war or a coup would never lead to a stronger nation. Yeah, maybe you'll get your Dr. Seuss, banning itch scratched, but you're not going to be able to, like I said, get your heart medicine. And by the way, there's not going to be a coup. And if it was, it's probably not going to be a conservative or a liberal coup. It's going to be a coup that would just basically take away your ability to do anything. And I think, look, a lot of people, imagine that a coup or an armed insurrection is just going to be like camping out with the boys. It's going to be a great time. We're drinking some PBRs. That's not true. There's going to be death. And that death is going to be people that you love. And it's time that we get past fetishizing the violence in this. It's time that we get past fetishizing this idea of overthrowing the government and the Second Amendment encouraging us to overthrow the government. That is reserved for times, frankly, if there is a military coup, which won't happen because no military member in the United States of America that takes their oath seriously would ever participate. But it's for that kind of stuff, not for, I don't like the future of Dr. Seuss in this country.